कहते हैं कि क्रांतिकारी की जिंदगी संघर्षों की जिंदगी होती है और मरने के बाद भी वो संघर्षों में जिंदा रहता है। साईं बाबा का संघर्ष जिंदगी भी जब आप देखेंगे या कभी लिखने की कोशिश करेंगे तो वो ऐसा लगेगा कि आप साईं बाबा की जिंदगी नहीं लिख रहे हैं, एक संघर्ष की का इतिहास लिख रहे हैं। और वो आगे भी कंटिन्यू हो रहा है प्रेजेंट टाइम पे, जहाँ पे भी संघर्ष हो रहे हैं एक बेहतर समाज के लिए। साईं बाबा की मेमोरी जिंदा है। मैं बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहूँगा कॉमरेड वसंता का कि उन्होंने साईं के लाइफ का, उनके स्ट्रगल का, या दोनों चीज़ें एक ही हैं, उसका एक डिटेल डिस्क्रिप्शन दिया हम लोग को। मैं हमारे बीच में एडवोकेट, सुप्रीम कोर्ट एडवोकेट प्रशांत भूषण जी हैं। मैं उनसे चाहता हूं कि वो प्लीज़ हमको स्टेज पे ज्वाइन करें ताकि हम आगे कंटिन्यू कर सकते हैं प्रोग्राम। अनफॉर्चुनेटली प्रोफेसर हरगोपाल, क्योंकि वो बुजुर्ग भी हैं, उनकी तबीयत भी खराब रहती है, वो हमारे बीच में आज मौजूद नहीं हो पाए हैं। और अभी साथी नंदनी सुंदर ने भी बताया था कि कॉमरेड साथी सिद्धार्थ वरदराजन जर्नलिस्ट, वो भी हमारे बीच में नहीं होंगे। तो इसी पैनल के साथ हम आगे बढ़ेंगे। जैसा कॉमरेड वसंता ने बोला कि साईं जो संघर्ष लड़ते थे उसको वो हर वक्त अपने साथ कैरी फॉरवर्ड करते थे, अपने जिंदगी के जीने के तरीके में लेके चलते थे। लव, केयर और ह्यूमैनिटी, ये वर्ड साथी ने इस्तेमाल किया। और मैं सोच रहा था कि आखिर वो क्या चीज़ है, जैसे साथी डिस्क्राइब कर रहे थे कि कितना साईं को टॉर्चर किया गया कि वो कॉम्प्रोमाइज कर लें। वो बस ये बोल दें कि मेरे से अब और नहीं होगा, वो बस ये बोल दें कि ये जो पीपल्स रेजिस्टेंस है ये गलत है और उनको छोड़ दिया जाएगा। साईं चाहते तो वो ये कर सकते थे शायद, वो यूनिवर्सिटी में प्रोफेसर थे, वो एक जिंदगी गुजार सकते थे। लेकिन 90% डिसेबल्ड, चेयर बाउंड होने के, व्हील चेयर बाउंड होने के बाद भी साईं बाबा एक ऐसे इंसान है जिनको कोई लिमिट्स नहीं रोक पाई। वो कुछ कॉमरेड्स नरेट करते हैं कि पोलावरम डैम प्रोजेक्ट जब आया तो उसके अगेंस्ट में पीपल्स मूवमेंट बहुत बड़े स्केल पे फैला था। तो प्रोग्रेसिव डेमोक्रेटिक सेक्शंस ने फैक्ट फाइंडिंग टीम्स बनाई और वहां पे गए। डिसेबल्ड होने के बाद भी, इतने लिमिटेशंस, हेल्थ कॉम्प्लिकेशंस होने के बाद भी साईं बाबा वैसी फैक्ट फाइंडिंग पे गए रिमोट एरियाज में, और तमाम ऐसे फैक्ट फाइंडिंग्स पे गए। तो ये अगर जनता के लिए प्यार नहीं है, अगर प्यार नहीं है एक लोगों के लिए, उनके दर्द के प्रति, तो क्या है जो एक इंसान को अपना सब कुछ न्यौछावर करके लड़ने के लिए आगे बढ़ाता है? ये जनता के लिए ही प्यार है, और इसलिए ही जनता के संघर्षों में ऐसे लोग हमेशा के लिए अमर हो जाते हैं। मैं चाहूंगा कि प्रोफेसर मनोरंजन मोहंती आगे आके अपनी बात रखें। अगर साथी प्रोफेसर मनोरंजन मोहंती ने काफी लंबे समय काम किया है उड़ीसा के स्ट्रगल्स पे भी, तो मैं चाहूंगा कि वो थोड़ा अपना बात।
That was a great account, a human account by Vasanta. Story of love, truth, beauty. And when she said, Jan Andolan unka do pair tha, I think that is something this audience will not forget. I met Sai before 2000, many civil liberty meetings. My dear friend, I think I have been to the undivided Andhra Pradesh more on civil liberty work than to Odisha. Yes, some to Odisha. In fact, Odisha friends used to complain. And that's when in one meeting, after a meeting, I was introduced to Sai and I was told that he was moving to Delhi. I was very excited, this very active and always jolly. That's something, and all the pictures, capture that so well. A fighter, but always in high spirits, conveying the hopes and dreams and the positivity of our struggle. Basanta gave that good bit of that. I will be brief. I want to hear some other friends. I can't, unfortunately, stay very long. My health doesn't permit. For me, the life of Sai Baba has been a human rights milestone of the human rights movement. And now, after his death, that milestone has become more radiant. Therefore, Basanta reassured, Sai Baba will never be dead. Sai Baba shall never die. The milestone very often will be sought to be uprooted, like the state did with Bhagat Singh, the rulers did with Bhagat Singh, Sai Bhagat Singh. And we have seen in Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, in many places, there will be martyrs' memorials and the police will destroy them. Again, the memorials will come up. I've seen in Koraput, Ganjam, in many places, and of course in Hyderabad and many places. Indravali, the Indravali memorial has been twice or thrice destroyed. So state will try, but they will not succeed. Just as I think now world history has recorded and has given a permanent place of revolutionary inspiration to Sai Bhagat Singh, the same will happen to Sai Baba. Well, friends, I think on the 12th, Sai Baba's college restoration case is coming up in the High Court. And I hope, common sense tells me that he was acquitted and therefore his job should have been restored. This should have been done when he was alive. And we would have felt so good that, this system, despite all the injustices, abides by rule of law. I think Sai Baba's struggles and life has documented how the state operates against rule of law, against the constitution. I think Prashant Bhushan has proved it in so many cases. So it would have been nice. So I urge that our appeal, pressure, movement must tell the Delhi University, the college governing board, because the college staff association had a memorial meeting and the demand was also that, Ramlal College. And I hope the university which has opposed this restoration plea should consider so a little humanism. And I think we should keep the pressure on, keep the movement on, keep this concrete issue on. So this human rights milestone, I think I was about to retire when Sai Baba was most active, and I was occasionally only interacting when he was so busy in the campaign to get reservation policy implemented for both students and faculty in Delhi University. That's when Nandita Narayan was on the forefront as the Delhi University Teachers Association leader. And again, human rights movement has concrete issues to fight for. And right to social justice is a concrete issue in education. And after so much movement that was achieved in terms of admissions as well as college appointments, but that's not being implemented even now. And now there is a whole campaign by the ruling party to dilute it, even the rhetoric is different. So, and the same kind of concretization of the issues of human rights we saw in his prison time on the rights of prisoners, and I was really moved by the emphasis that again and again Prashant made, because that was a great preoccupation of Saibaba, that rights of prisoners, rights of political prisoners, and we have been part of this campaign for the release of political prisoners all these decades. But what is the situation? In fact, and the policy rhetoric of this government is in the opposite direction, very clearly. Well, I also saw that in his, in his thesis, which is still not published. I think it should be published very soon. And other writings, his academic writings. Mostly he was trying to emphasize how writings, not only in the Indian languages but also in English, were reflecting the struggle over two concepts of nationalism: hegemonic nationalism and democratic nationalism. Hegemonic nationalism propounded by rulers, and one extreme form of it is what you are seeing now, the Hindutva nationalism. Another is authoritarian, homogenized notion of national integration with a strong state, strong military, strong bureaucracy, strong political leadership. And he was saying that throughout the freedom struggle and in post-independence India, the movement for people's nationalism, or whatever you call it, people's autonomy, people's self-determination, that was the alternative trend. And you could see this in both English writings, the struggle, and in the Indian language literature. And this message of Saibaba, the English professor, English writer, English researcher, English literature scholar, this has to be highlighted. The alternative notions of, unity of people and the political form that unity should take. Decentralized, multi-layered political form, so that participatory democracy becomes really the bulwark, the foundation for an egalitarian society. Saibaba, the anti-imperialist, anti-globalization, liberalization, privatization, that phase, we were all part of that forum, the movement against that kind of neoliberal aggression on our society, which has now become a norm. And I have seen him articulate in some of the most simplest ways how people suffer under neoliberalism. And those, I told you, the Saibaba method of fighting, identifying and fighting for human rights, was to concretize the issues. So how people's lives in the concrete were affected. So friends, this human rights milestone, which will continue to shine, will continue to inspire us, and we have to also concretely continue this struggle. I think I have now 3 concrete issues to propose. One is the campaign against UAPA. I think this campaign has to be fought. I think we have leaders who have been very active, very inspired to see so many veteran civil liberty fighters and the young generation. So one becomes hopeful about democratic people's rights movement in India. So one is UAPA. We have to fight against UAPA. And there are many other laws reflecting the UAPA. Second is, I think, people's culture. I think, some of the early writings of Sai Baba and his friends, particularly in the undivided Andhra Pradesh, now Telangana and Andhra both, how the people's social science, people's poetry, people's literature should shape our consciousness. So the movement of democratic culture of people, because that is being suppressed under globalization, computerization and standardization, especially under the new education policy. And the third is pursue and practice democracy in all institutions. Make the university a school of democracy, school of human rights. Because now the robotic reproduction process is the function of the universities. Whereas humanism, democratic rights, people's culture, that is the kind of school, the university, that Sai Baba came to and was trying to promote. Let us all join that Sai Baba tradition and make this human rights milestone a permanent signpost forever. Thank you very much.
किसी को रोकना या लिमिट करना इज नॉट अ गुड आइडिया, बट अभी हमारे पास थोड़ा टाइम का लिमिटेशंस भी हैं. तो इसके साथ ही मैं अगला स्पीकर सुप्रीम कोर्ट एडवोकेट मिस्टर प्रशांत भूषण को बुलाना चाहूँगा. वो प्लीज आके अपना बात रखें.
थैंक यू. साई बाबा की जिंदगी, कैन आई स्पीक इन इंग्लिश? विल एवरीबडी will be comfortable? Okay. So Sai Baba's life is an example of courage and humanism combined, where he fought against all odds, against his physical odds, against his financial situation to begin with, for the most oppressed and for the most repressed, who were under the guns of the state and the corporates. I was just reading, I didn't even know some of these things. I was just reading this short 4 or 5 page note about his life, and it shows that at every stage of his life, he got involved with movements against state repression. Of course, it's the state and corporate nexus which has produced that kind of repression, and the most violent and the worst kind of repression at all times. And it requires a great deal of courage. That's why I said that his life is an example of courage and humanism. where he saw what was really the most oppressive and repressive things going on in society, who were responsible for that. It took great courage to stand up against that and raise your voice against that. And he did it against such odds, especially his physical disability. So it's a kind of life that comes few and far between, and it's the kind of life that injects courage and humanism in society. And I hope that I do think that his life's example has injected that kind of humanism and courage in our society. His own story of his incarceration and thereafter the kind of treatment meted out to him in jail itself exemplifies all that he was fighting for. He was, or what he was fighting against. He was fighting against precisely this kind of thing, where the state, just because he was raising his voice against this kind of repression, therefore the state came after him, foisted a false case on him. The judicial process went on, and even after he was acquitted the first time, it was by the High Court, after many years in jail, it was stayed on a Saturday by the Supreme Court, and he had to continue in jail until he was finally acquitted on merits by a more detailed judgment after a couple of years, and only thereafter he was released. But during that time in jail, what he suffered physically, he didn't die because of this operation or some complications due to the operation. Those complications, that operation was occasioned by the kind of treatment that he had been given in 10 years in the jail, or 10, 11 years. And the complications also were on account of all that. So it's not a case of a natural death. It's a case of his being killed by the state and by the judiciary. Now, I have always said that there are so many cases, people in Bhima Koregaon, people in the Delhi riots cases are languishing in jail without the trial even having begun for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, etc. And we have found that the record in such kind of cases is that there is virtually 99% people who eventually come to be acquitted. Only 1%, but they come to be acquitted after 10 years, 12 years, 15 years in jail. And unfortunately, even when the case is found to be totally mala fide and totally false and fabricated, even then the people who have fabricated that case or foisted that case are not made to suffer any consequences. And of course the judges, in my view, there has to be accountability both of the police and the state as well as of the judiciary for this kind of thing. Now, of course, I can understand that no judge can be blamed for delays, etc., which are virtually endemic in our system. But a judge can certainly be blamed for what happened on that Saturday, when 2 Supreme Court judges sat on a Saturday and stayed his acquittal and prevented him from coming out. Now, I have always been of the view that in all such cases where there is eventual acquittal, quite apart from the reforms that are needed in our police agencies or in our judiciary, the minimum that is necessary even in this present system is that when a person comes to be acquitted, it should be incumbent on the judge to record a finding whether his acquittal was on account of a false case being deliberately foisted on him, or whether it is on account of just failure of justice due to witnesses turning hostile, etc. So it could be a bona fide case which has fallen through, or it could be a mala fide case which was foisted and that's why it has fallen through. If it's a mala fide case which has been foisted on somebody, I feel that it is essential that those police officers who foisted and their political bosses who made them foist that case, they should be held accountable, which means that they should be made to pay exemplary damages from their pockets to the person and or to the family of the person who has been so incarcerated for such long period and made to suffer for such long periods of time. But what about judges? Ultimately, the judiciary can hold the police and the executive accountable, and they should be doing that. Unfortunately, they have not been doing that. But what happens when the judiciary itself, again, as I say, there can be an error of judgment, or there can be sometimes orders which are not mere errors of judgment, which are either ideological in nature or which are mala fide in nature. And if it is found that there are judgments rendered by judges which are mala fide in nature, or so grossly irresponsible, then I feel that the judges also should be held accountable. But the question is, who is to hold the judges accountable? And that's why we have been saying that there needs to be a proper independent judicial accountability commission or a judicial complaints commission where such complaints against judicial misbehavior or judicial misconduct could be lodged, and those judges should be held accountable for this kind of thing. So, of course, as I said, Sai Baba's life is an inspiration for all of us. It's an inspiration for humanism and courage. But we also simultaneously need to work towards and agitate for systemic reforms within the police agencies, within our laws, these draconian laws like UAPA, PMLA, etc. Systemic reforms in the judiciary, and apart from that, specific accountability for police officers and including judges. Of course, for judges we will need to have judicial reforms to bring in a judicial accountability commission. But certainly for police officers, it's incumbent on the courts to render a finding as to whether the case was mala fide, and if it was found to be so, then hold those police officers and their political bosses accountable. So I believe that Sai Baba, even in Sai Baba's death, his spirit lives on, and his spirit continues to inspire all of us towards what he exemplified, which is humanism and courage. Thank you very much.
साई को टॉर्चर किया गया, जेल में रखा गया। सुहास बाबूजी का क्या, जिसने उनको अरेस्ट किया, उनको फ्रेम किया इस केस में, या एनआईए का क्या कोई अकाउंटेबल होगा, या सिर्फ 10 साल बाद आप बोल देंगे कि ये इंसान गलत तरीके से फंसाया गया था और केस खत्म? साई के डेथ के लिए, मर्डर के लिए कौन रिस्पॉन्सिबल है? इसके लिए भी हमको सोचने की ज़रूरत है, और इस तरीके के तमाम जो पॉलिटिकल प्रिजनर्स जेल में पड़े हुए हैं, उनकी रिलीज की डिमांड को आगे बढ़ाने की ज़रूरत है। आगे मैं नेशनल प्लेटफॉर्म फॉर राइट्स ऑफ डिसेबल्ड के जनरल सेक्रेटरी मुरलीधरन जी को रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि वो आके अपनी बात रखें। इसके बाद 10 मिनट का एक बीच में कल्चरल परफॉर्मेंसेज होंगे, उसके बाद नेक्स्ट सेशन कंटिन्यू होगा। तो मैं सभी साथियों से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि हमारे साथ बने रहें। थैंक
यू। फ्रेंड्स एंड कॉमरेड्स, बहुत कुछ बता चुकी है वसंता, अपनी जर्नी, पूरी लाइफ की जर्नी को लेकर आई। इट वाज क्वाइट इमोशनल एंड स्पीकिंग at a time when she was so traumatized, so much in anguish and pain. itself actually dwells on how strong a woman she is. So I actually salute her first, because she has been all through with me actually, in the sense that throughout from 2015 onwards up to his release, at every stage of any development that was happening in science, they should always come to us, ask us to petition various agencies and things like that. So it was like that. I actually साई के साथ मेरा कोई पुराना कोई नाता नहीं था, ना कभी मिला था उनसे पहले, रिहाई से पहले कभी उनसे मुलाकात नहीं थी। 2015 में 2014 में जब उनका अरेस्ट हुआ था, और 2015 में सबसे पहली बार हमने उनके केस को रिप्रेजेंट करने की कोशिश की। हमारे विकलांगों का संगठन नेशनल प्लेटफॉर्म राइट्स ऑफ डिसेबल लोगों का संगठन है, इसलिए विकलांगता के पर्सपेक्टिव से ही उसको हमने डील किया था। वी आर अप्रोच द नेशनल ह्यूमन राइट्स कमीशन फर्स्ट। पहले सबसे पहले तो डिसेबल लोगों की ग्रीवेंसेस मैकेनिज्म की जो बॉडी है, चीफ कमिश्नर फॉर पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटीज, उनके पास गए थे। जब उनके पास से कोई रिलीफ नहीं मिला तो हम गए थे नेशनल ह्यूमन राइट्स कमीशन के पास। 2015 से 2022 के दरमियान 5 बार हम गए थे ह्यूमन राइट्स कमीशन के पास। वसंता भी थी एक बार नंदिता भी थी हमारे साथ में, कई साथी थे। वी हैड गॉन विद ओनली द डिसेबिलिटी पर्सपेक्टिव व्यू। हम कहते थे कि यूनाइटेड नेशंस कन्वेंशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ पर्सन्स विद डिसेबिलिटीज इंडिया ने साइन किया है, रेटिफाई किया है। दैट कन्वेंशन अंडर वेरियस आर्टिकल्स, आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू डिटेल्स ऑफ द आर्टिकल्स, has various provisions as far as disabled people are concerned। उनको किस तरह प्रिजन में ट्रीट करना चाहिए, पुलिस मैकेनिज्म्स क्या होना चाहिए, जुडिशरी में क्या अकोमोडेशन होना चाहिए, तमाम चीजों के बारे में यूएनसीआरपीडी ने कहा है। आपने 2016 में इस देश में कानून पारित किया, राइट्स ऑफ पर्सन्स विद डिसेबिलिटीज एक्ट। उस कानून के तहत बहुत सारे प्रोविजंस हैं। क्या उस साईं बाबा केस में क्या उसने लागू किया? We have signed United Convention of Torture against torture, but ratify नहीं किया। और इस सरकार की बात नहीं है। इस कन्वेंशन 1984 का है, आपने साइन उसको 1997 में किया है, बट टिल डेट यू आर नॉट ए कंट्री दैट हैज रैटिफाइड द कन्वेंशन ऑफ टॉर्चर। टॉर्चर हो रहा है। साइन के साथ जो हुआ है इट इज एक्चुअली टॉर्चर इन द सेंस कि सबसे पहले उनके व्हीलचेयर को डैमेज किया गया। His wheelchair is actually part of his body. That is what he used for mobility throughout. उस व्हीलचेयर को आपने इमोबिलाइज किया, उनको इमोबिलाइज किया पहले, उसके बाद जो है अनडिग्निफाइड ट्रीटमेंट दैट वाज, देयर वाज नो फिजिकल टॉर्चर एज सच, बट देयर इज अ मेंटल टॉर्चर दैट इज हैपनिंग थ्रूआउट हिज स्टे इन प्रिजन। वेयर हैज दिस बीन एड्रेस्ड? एनएचआरसी ने हमारे 5 पिटीशन पे जो है एक बार एक टीम भेजा था नागपुर जेल। They gone, they studied and made some recommendations. वो recommendations क्या हमें पता नहीं। No, it's not there available public domain. नालसर से एक टीम, नालसर हैदराबाद की एक टीम गया था। They had actually surveyed the jail also later on. वो भी एक रिपोर्ट लेके आए। Now we are going to work on that. साइड से जब मुलाकात हुई थी उनके रिहाई के बाद, सबसे पहले सुरजीत पर प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस थी 8 मार्च इसी साल। उसके बाद एक बार हम घर गए थे उनसे मिलने। आई प्रोबोनो एक संस्था है जो केसेस लड़ती है ऑन प्रो बोनो बेसिस, उनके साथ हम गए थे। The main point of discussion was actually to deal on access to jail, access to the judicial process as from the disability perspective. And Sai had actually agreed to become a petitioner. That's it. So we are actually developing on that. Unfortunately, this thing happened. 10 साल की उनकी जो कैद हुआ, उस समय जो टॉर्चर उनके साथ किया गया, जैसे प्रशांत जी ने कहा, एक्चुअली ही डाइड नॉट बिकॉज ऑफ दिस हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन एंड द सर्जरी दैट हैपेंड, ही डाइड बिकॉज व्हाट वाज डन टू हिम जेल। 2015 में जब उनको व्हेन ही गॉट द इंटरिम बेल जो मिला था पहली बार, उसी टाइम डायग्नोस हुआ था उनका गॉल ब्लैडर स्टोन का। एंड रिपीटेडली he has been approaching courts for bail, for parole। ये हमारे सिरसा के राम रहीम, उनको साल में कितनी बार मिलता है उसको पैरोल? जितने मर्जी उतने आप पैरोल मिल जाता है, नो क्वेश्चंस आस्क्ड। बट साई वाज, यू हैड टू हैव सर्जरी विद एक्चुअल लाइफ थ्रेटनिंग कंडीशंस थे उनके, and many of his conditions were actually developed in jail. He had some medical conditions earlier, but much of the conditions that he developed earlier or aggravated were actually during his jail. प्रसन्ना बार बार फरियाद भी करती थी कि दवाएं ले जाने तक की परमिशन उन्हें नहीं मिली। So there were several issues connected with that, तमाम चीज़ों में ज़्यादा नहीं चाहूँगा, but the thing is, as a person with disabilities, जो reasonable accommodations उनको कानून के तहत है, कानून में जो कहा गया है, जिस कन्वेंशन को आप साइन किया यूएन कन्वेंशन को, उसके तहत जो कहा गया, उन तमाम चीजों को भी आपने इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं किया, एंड यू आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर हिज डेथ. साई हैज नॉट डाइड, ही वाज किल्ड बाय द स्टेट. लाइक अनदर स्टैन स्वामी, स्टैन को भी जो है, स्टैन अगेन वाज अ पर्सन विद पार्किंसंस. स्टैन की हालत बहुत खराब थी, बट द स्टेट डिप्राइव्ड हिम, द जुडिशियरी डिप्राइव्ड हिम, एज Prashant ji ne kaha, he should be held accountable. And again, I would actually endorse what Prashant Bhushan ji has said, that there needs to be accountability. We cannot let these people go scot-free. They have to be held accountable, and they have to be held accountable by the people. With these words, I conclude. Thank you.
अपनी बात होगी.
साथियों, जय भीम, जोहार, लाल सलाम, आप सबको नमस्ते. Before I begin, I want to extend my condolences on my own behalf and also on behalf of Siddharth Varadarajan, who apologized to the family, friends and comrades of Sai for not being here today. The reason may sound strange, but one of us has to be at home because from this morning there have been crackers in our neighborhood and our dogs are terrified. And when I think, we can't leave them and one of us has to stay. And every time this happens, it reminds me of what is happening in Gaza when people talk about humans being killed, but nobody is talking about how animals are braving the daily bombing. We don't hear about the animals in the forest who, when there is Operation Green Hunt, various operations, when the sound of gunfire takes place, nobody talks about the animals in the forest. This war that is going on in this country, for which Sai fought, against which Sai fought all his life, is something that affects human beings. It affects the trees and the way that the landscape is being decimated. It affects the animals and the birds who can no longer fly freely. This morning, you might have read an interview where a retiring judge talked about the fact that when some people are not given bail, it becomes a topic of conversation without looking at all the other cases where people are being given bail. It would be like a doctor who says, I've saved so many lives, and so when I deliberately let somebody die, I should not be blamed for it. Or it would be like teachers who said that because I've passed some students, it's okay if I fail everybody else deliberately, even when they don't deserve it. What kind of logic is this? That a judge can get away with saying that it's okay not to give bail when it's due, or not to acquit somebody when it's due, just because some other people have been given bail. Sai's institutional murder is one of 3 institutional murders that we have seen in the last few years because of the legal system and the way the carceral systems work. We know about Sai, we know about Stan, but I would ask you also to remember Pandu Narote, who was one of the accused with Sai, who died supposedly of swine flu. Had Pandu Narote been outside, would he have died of swine flu? If Pandu Narote had been alive today, he would have been acquitted. So that death of swine flu supposedly is also an institutional murder. I'm not the last time I saw Sai, I also want to thank Basanta for telling us about Sai. I'm deeply humbled by listening to the story of his life, the story of Basanta's own courage. In fact, I've seen Basanta more than I've seen Sai, perhaps, and her steadfastness, her courage, her persistence has been truly, truly inspiring. I think Sai and Basanta deserved each other. They're both inspiring to us. I'm not going to, because when I first started meeting Sai, it was at these meetings on Operation Green Hunt. I just want to talk a little bit about, not very long, just the issues today. Yesterday, there was a press conference after a major operation in Bijapur where 3 people were killed. The IG of Bastar announced, they put out a press release saying that 192 people have been killed in this last 1 year alone. 782 people have been arrested and 783 have surrendered, quote unquote. In a conversation with the IG some months ago, he said that he estimated that the Maoist strength in Bastar was about 1,500. So if over 1,500 people have been arrested and surrendered and 192 have been killed, then why do we have camps every 2 kilometers or every 5 kilometers in Bastar? The whole of Bastar is now a vast cantonment. There are security camps with barbed wire, camps which have come up across villages, across the region. And these camps come up overnight. They come up, the trees are just overnight cut. We don't know what's happening, who's taking the trees. And we asked, the administration why they didn't ask for permission when they built these camps. So they said, because if we did, then there would be a security threat to our building the camps. So then we said, what about the trees? They said, the forest department comes and marks them beforehand. So, they have given us unofficial permission. So if you know enough to mark the trees beforehand, then you know enough to inform the villagers that you're going to build a camp. So the whole thing is one huge, unaccountable scam. It's really a scam of the largest proportions where you're cutting huge numbers of trees without any permission, you're establishing camps, taking over people's land, you're killing people and passing it off as encounters. Now, of these 3 people killed today's the 10th, 2 days ago, 2 of them are ordinary villagers who were shot, and even in the press conference that the IG said, he just named one of them as an Inami Naxali and has said, we are still finding out who those other people are. Well, the villagers have found out who those other people are and they're saying that they are ordinary villagers. What happened was that there was an operation where 9 or 10 villages were rounded up and 44 people have been now arrested. We don't know where. We know that 8 leaders of the Moolwasi Bachao Manch, which is an organization of mostly young people who had fled their villages when Salva Judum began and their houses were burnt, their entire village was burnt. When they grew up, they decided that they were not going to flee anymore. They were going to stay in their land. They were going to use the constitution and the law. They were going to use Pesa to fight for their rights. And they have been having andolans for the last 2 years. I mean, this is remarkable that young people are sustaining andolans across dharnas, across the region against camps coming up on their land, demanding their constitutional rights under Pesa, and the government is uprooting those andolans, arresting people. So now 8 people of the Moolwasi Bachao Manch have been arrested in the last 2 days. Again, we don't know their whereabouts. When people surrender, that's a way of keeping them in jail without following due process, because you don't have to produce them in 24 hours, they surrender, quote unquote. And as we found out recently, a friend of mine who was tortured and then shown as surrendering in 2017, cases that he had before that have now been brought up again, and he's back in jail. I mean, he's now in jail. So when you surrender, the cases against you don't go away. They're used to force you to become an informer or to fight for the state as a DRG, District Reserve Guard. And the Supreme Court judgment, which outlawed the use of SPOs under any name, which includes the DRG, has been contemptuously cast aside. And for the last 12 years, the Supreme Court has not heard the contempt petition. So what can one say? When the state has such contempt for its people, what should the citizens' reaction be? What can it be? And we must look to the life of Sai for inspiration to keep on fighting against this injustice, to remember that it's only when people struggle, and Sai's life was an example of that struggle, that there will be change and there will be hope in the future. Thank you.
डरती है, इस पहिए वाली कुर्सी से हर काली कुर्सी डरती है। ये सेठ साई से डरता था, और ये सेठ साई से इसलिए डरता था क्योंकि वो एक रेवोल्यूशनरी था। वो जनता का आवाज उठाता था, वो पुअरेस्ट ऑफ द पुअर का आवाज उठाता था, वो हर एक्सप्लॉइटेड और ऑप्रेस्ड मासेस का आवाज उठाता था, उनके लिए लड़ाई करता था। साई ने ऑपरेशन ग्रीन हंट के खिलाफ लड़ाई करी है, और अभी भी ये वॉर ऑन पीपल रुका नहीं है। अभी भी ऑपरेशन कागार के नाम पे अभी भी ये वॉर ऑन पीपल जारी है। और जैसे कि हम अपना अगला गाना गाने जा रहे हैं, वो भी हमको यही बताता है कि हमको साई की लड़ाई रोकनी नहीं है। अगर साई हमारे बीच नहीं रहे तब भी हमको उनकी लड़ाई कंटिन्यू करनी है, और हमको एक नवजनवादी क्रांति की ओर अपने कदम बढ़ाने हैं, और हम बढ़ाएंगे।
लाल झंडा लेकर कॉमरेड आगे बढ़ते जाएंगे, तुम नहीं रहे इसका गम है, पर फिर भी लड़ते जाएंगे। लाल झंडा लेकर कॉमरेड आगे बढ़ते जाएंगे, तुम नहीं रहे इसका गम है, पर फिर भी लड़ते जाएंगे। इस जहान के सारे नौजवान चल पड़े हैं आज तेरी राह पे। इस जहान के सारे नौजवान चल पड़े हैं आज तेरी राह पे, कर रहे हैं बार 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 में जालिमों के किले के द्वार पे, कर रहे हैं बार 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 में जालिमों के किले के द्वार पे। कूच कूच से आ रही सदा एक नया जहां हम बनाएंगे बनाएंगे बनाएंगे। लाल झंडा लेकर कॉमरेड आगे बढ़ते जाएंगे, तुम नहीं रहे इसका गम है, पर फिर भी लड़ते जाएंगे। कृषक श्रमिक हर समूह से उठ रहे हैं आज नारी क्रांति के। कृषक श्रमिक के हर समूह से उठ रहे हैं आज नारी क्रांति के। जुल्म और मौत के खिलाफ आज लड़ने की कसम खा रहे हैं हम। जुल्म और मौत के खिलाफ आज लड़ने की कसम खा रहे हैं हम। विश्व को स्वतंत्र करके जुल्म से